um, we were making a joke about when the camera comes on, and the audience is looking at you, and you're not really sure how you're going to open a gig, especially given the weird times and circumstances of things. But here we are. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this edition of MoftMinds. I go by the name of Michael Opara. Some of you know me as Michael. Some of you know me as Dorian's Grave. It's a pleasure being with you tonight. Happy New Year. Happy New Year. It's 2021. On this edition of MoftMinds, we're going to be focusing on creatives. Actually, we're going to be focusing on creatives throughout the year, actually. But tonight we have two people in the house who I'm really excited to listen to their stories, and powerful, inspiring stories, by the way. By way of the UK, we have Rowson. How you
Hello.
doing?
Good. Thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome. You look great.
Thanks.
And of course, we have Sheila Feruz in the house. How's it going, Sheila?
It's going good. Thank you
Yeah.
for having me as well.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
It's been a while.
Yeah, actually, this is the first time we're seeing each other since New Year. Yeah.
Well, we're still in
Or
January.
over a year.
Okay, so today we're going to be looking at something, and the title of this conversation was called Decoding Culture. What does that even mean? So a lot of people in a city or in anywhere, in a community, they are what you call culture shifters. And you don't just become a culture shifter, usually starts with an idea. And then the idea starts in your head, and then you try to put it on a paper, and then somewhere along the line, you begin to realize that it's not that easy. So what we're going to do is this. We're going to start with Rowson, who's currently the managing director of Arrangementet. And I just want to know, how do you even get to become the managing director of Arrangementet?
Yeah, wow, we could go back like a long time, many years, but I became director last March. So I took over 2 weeks before Norway went into coronavirus lockdown. But I was thinking the other day, like it's been, when I was 15, I did work experience in a really, really tiny gallery run by one woman. And that's when I decided that's what I wanted to do.
Wow.
So now, 20 years later, that's what I'm doing. So, but that has been 20 years of, studying art, working in lots and lots of different projects, organizations. But I guess I've had for a long time this idea of wanting to be in this kind of position of running an organization.
When you say that, because a lot of people, when they see certain people in certain positions, I think they usually assume that you just somehow just ended up there.
Yeah.
Like you just mentioned, you got 20 years of experience in this
and a
game.
very like wiggly road that's had this very definite position I wanted to get to. And we were talking just before about like having this mindset, and I guess I've had this gut set for a long time that I've sort of felt I've always gone with what I feel like I want to do or what feels right, and that's what's maybe got me here now, and a lot of work and experience, and we were talking a bit before about preparation and keeping trying. And I guess Bergenschut was a job I applied for after applying for lots and lots and lots of jobs and not getting them.
Was there ever a time you just said to yourself, like, you know what, screw this, I'll do something else?
No, because there's this like competitive kernel in me that not many people get to see unless you play a board game with me, maybe. That comes out. Yeah, you don't want to get into a monopoly fight with me.
Not yourself.
But each time it's like I can do this, and I can believe in myself that I can get here. And actually, what happened in the process of applying for lots of different jobs that which were kind of moving, I guess, from being in a role of administrator or organizer to thinking about, actually I want to be in this position of making the decisions in an organization. It was a long process of also understanding how my background and experience, how I could talk about it. And I'm an artist, but I've worked in administration. and I worked for a long time in bars, but I also worked at the Tate. And so it's like trying to also understand how to talk about my experience, which doesn't come maybe through an academic background, or I haven't studied management and I haven't had a kind of clear institutional path. But so I think the process of applying for lots of jobs and knowing that I wanted to get here was also understanding how to feel like, confident in my experience and skills.
We're going to get back to that in a second. Sheila, right now you're working with Vuma.
Yes.
And I'm going to ask you the same question because I have to. I just asked her, how do you get to work in that organization? I mean, where do you even start? Because I know you lived in the UK. Mm-hmm. And so what prompted you to, make the move or make the shift to Norway?
Well, I mean, how can I can start first by explaining like what Vuma is.
Right.
And Vuma is an initiative that works to highlight minorities who've grown up or live in Norway. And it started also because like from growing up here and being a minority, just having this need of like wanting to see yourself represented in media and arts and different spaces. So then I decided to study in the UK because I just wanted to like get out of Bergen for a while and get a new perspective, because in the end I felt when I left I was like really, really just fed up of the rain. And the UK didn't really help because it rains there, but at least I felt like, okay, there's a more of a social life there. And it was the first time where I was in a place where I kind of like disappeared in the crowd.
You saw people who looked like you.
Yeah, and it was just like, refreshing for once, like, and going into a place and then there's like different cultures representing what you're seeing and all of this. And so it inspired me a lot. And so when I came back to Bergen, it was like, okay, I want to bring what I've seen there, because like, how come we don't have like a magazine that's led by minorities only in Bergen, for example? So it was kind of those things that inspired me, and I'm really thankful that I got to like go abroad and study. And
some people say sometimes the Bergen is like this really these relationships where when people tell you like you should leave him, and you say no, it's when it's good, it's really good, so you end up coming back, and then we start talking about the rain still, but we're still here. But
that's a good one.
we could throw this out here because a lot of people watching this right now, there's something I think I'm going to take out of what Eva said in her story is you've done so many different things over the last years, right? You even mentioned bartending, right? And you don't necessarily have to come from an academical background to do what you do. So in other words, where does networking, or how does networking affect the journey to achieving what you want to achieve or what you've achieved?
Yeah, I think it, yes, what is my response? It has a big part to play in how I got here. And maybe I should say it was very good, your introduction to what you actually do. Maybe I should just take a pause to say, for those of you who don't know, Bergenskjøtt is a cultural organisation and production house in a former meat factory on the outskirts of Bergen city centre. Although really I would like to say it's inside the city centre, which it is. It's really not that far away. With artists and music studios and concert and exhibition and event space. But yeah, networking, it's always been a really important part of my practice. And I studied art, and then through studying in a city where there weren't many opportunities to do exhibitions as an artist, so you had to make your own exhibitions or find a group of people who you could do that with, then networking or collaborating became part of my practice, or it just became a way of how I had to work as someone making work. And then at some point that became more interesting for me, or where I felt more comfortable was in collaborating. And then I guess, networking has sort of always then grown from finding these spaces of where I want to make things happen, or seeing a gap where what I want isn't there. So then how do we make it happen, and who do I do that with? And then the network kind of grows through that. And I guess also trying to sort of find networks across disciplines as well, that what can we learn from, what do I need to learn from someone doing this job that I don't have through this experience or practice? And I think that still stay with me now, that I'm really interested always to think about how to bring other people in, even if it feels like, their work or experience isn't relevant to the project. There is a way that we can learn from each other and find a sort of mutual point to share experience.
That's interesting because you're not from here, you know, because a lot of people I meet, they say things like, oh, I don't speak Norwegian. That might be a problem, you know, and it's kind of, it's refreshing to see someone who's, you know, not from here doing the things you're doing. And speaking of networking, because somehow for you, Norwegian as a language has not been a problem, or has it?
Yeah, we were just talking before that, I mean, it's incredible privilege to to have English as my first language and be able to come to another country and be able to speak English and not speak Norwegian and get a job and understand and expect and be so grateful at the same time that I will be able to speak English and people will be able to respond. And my Norwegian is definitely not at a level of understanding or speaking. But I really try to find ways to communicate as much in Norwegian if I can. Google Translate has been an excellent tool, but also finding ways to communicate if English and Norwegian aren't our first languages. But I was just saying to Sheila before that at the moment, like I can translate the facts easily, especially with the changing facts around coronavirus. Like I can do that, but I don't have the noise of what the responses are, what people are saying, what the discussions are on the news and the street. And that's quite hard not to get that kind of noise. And I feel like sometimes it gives me an edge because I'm sort of don't have my ears to it. So I just go with my gut and I just do things that might seem a bit mad, but that I'd get them done. And sometimes I just feel lost because I can't kind of get the vibe of how something like the past year is really affecting people beyond what's sort of in the news or in Kommuna's latest corona update, or through what friends and colleagues are able to translate for me. So it's a privilege to be able to do this conversation in English. But it's definitely a missing part of my being here at the moment.
I'm guessing you're working on that at some point.
Yeah. Yeah.
What about you, Sheila? Networking.
When it comes to networking? I would say like when we first started working on Vuma, like it was really, really hard. Even with when it comes to like working in film, because like my background is, when I was in the UK for 3 years, I was studying film and creative writing. And then when I came back in 2017, I went back to work at Kiwi because I didn't know how the film industry works here. Where do you start? And so my first approach was to like go straight to the studios and be like, hey, I have this idea. and then I came here at Litteraturhuset with a friend once from high school, and we were just catching up. And then I was like downstairs and I said, I want to ask them about if we can use the space down, like one of the rooms for a writing workshop. And she was like, you should just email.
Send an email.
You don't show up at someone's office. And so that's sort of like when it sank in, like, oh, okay, maybe that's a bit weird. But because there was a point where I was like floating around in Bergen, like I didn't know what to do. So I found a great value in going to events. That I think like that's the best networking tool you can ever use. Just show up at events, because it's so hard for people to reject you if they've met you in person. So you meet them and you say hi, and then you send them an email, then they're much more likely to answer because they don't want, like, they're like, oh my God, we spoke. I don't want them to think I'm rude. So then they answer you, even though it's like a no or something. So like, I think for us, like we now have workshops at Litteraturhuset, and we've been able to like do different projects, and it's mostly because of like showing up and just being interested and engaging in what's going on, because there's a lot of things happening in Bergen.
I mean, we live in Norway, and let's be honest, okay? People talk about networking, and which I believe, of course, is a very important tool if you're trying to get anywhere when it comes to cultural curation or whatever. But let's not forget, we live in Norway. it's not that easy to communicate with people.
Yeah.
Because Norwegians are not exactly the most outspoken individuals around, that's for sure. And that's fine. They're mostly introverts, and that's okay. So when you say we go out and you meet people, how often do you get rejected in terms of the emails? Because people can say hi to be nice to you, of course, in person. But how often do you get a positive response from those emails?
I mean, it took like 2 years.
2 years.
2 years of like constant no's, honestly. And then you double it with writing really bad funding applications. And so it took 2 years really of like, should I keep doing this? Okay, there's this event happening. Let me just go and see what's happening. And then you meet someone randomly, and then you start talking about your idea, and they're like, you should email me or talk to this person. That's usually like the value of going out. And yes, I mean, it's hard to get social, but at the same time, it's just something about like, you need to seeing people. So yeah, maybe I'll see you at an event and we don't talk, but I remember you. And I'll be like, hey, I saw you there. And just writing that in the email, people will be like, oh my God, we've met. Okay, I shouldn't be rude. So that usually helps. And you just have to be like persistent. Because just because they email you once that they're not interested, maybe you'll meet them next time at somewhere and at an event. Usually not in the supermarket on the street. That doesn't work. But at an event,
Pro tip.
People are more likely to talk to you or just like notice you in a way, because you have maybe your wine in hand or, it helps. But it's a lot of awkwardness. It's a lot of awkwardness. Yeah. Just having like flashbacks.
But how do you guys get past? I mean, this is a question to both of you, of course. How do you get past the awkwardness? Because you mentioned persistence, right?
Yeah.
But how do you say, you know what, I'm gonna keep going? How do you do that? What drives you? Why don't you just say, you know what, fuck this, let me get a job, and do that, then do this? It must be something inside of you that says, let me keep going. How does that even?
Yeah, I think because I know this is something I've been practicing and doing for a long time, and I feel like I can see what I want to do in it, and often I'm paying attention to things that seem a bit kind of obscure, or I don't know, I'm curious about things that maybe no one else is interested in, and I come at things from a sort of weird way, but I've learned to own those a bit more. And when I took over the job at Berg & Schütz, someone asked me, how will I not go bankrupt? And I was like, I haven't really thought about that. I've just been thinking about like how to make a cleaning cupboard so that the cleaners can put their trolley somewhere. And I've tried to think about like, do the studios need like soap dispensers so they can wash their hands properly? Like I haven't really thought about if I'm going to go bankrupt or not, but I probably should, because now I'm the director of an organization. This is an important question. But somehow, these things that I care about sort of keep me going. And I struggle with like if it's a job or a project, and then I get too invested in it. And I don't know, I feel like I come from, this privileged position of being, an English speaker. I've had an education and was able to travel. I mean, we see what happens with Brexit now really freely. Like I'm here, I've got this. And that's what's keeping me going to, All
right, what about you, Sheila? Because people keep saying things like, what's the word? Keep pushing. I hear that a lot.
I mean, it's really nice when you're starting something and you have like this, you're just on tunnel vision. And I would say for me, like when I first graduated, when I came back to Bergen and was working in Kiwi, my plan was just to work there for like 6 months, save everything, and then go back to the UK because I didn't want to stay here. And then when I came back, then I joined the VUMA team. So at the time, it was a bunch of guys who wanted to like launch an African magazine. So that was the first vision.
Right.
And then And then I got engaged in it. I was like, okay, I can just stay one more month, just one more month. And then it became like a year. And then the project just stopped and it ended. And I was like, guys, but this is a good thing, you know? And it was like the only thing I was doing outside of my work.
Right.
And it just, and it was like giving me like a sort of distraction, because I really didn't like, working the job I was doing, and I was like just graduated and I wanted to get into the film world. And then, so when that happened, when they kind of just shut down the whole thing because we didn't get funding, I was like, no, come on, we have to keep trying. And so, but then I came to a point where I was like, I had saved enough. And then so I was like, I could either go stay, like try the dream of going to the UK again, or keep pushing with Wuma.
Right.
And so I quit the job at Kiwi. And then I was like, okay, I'll just go to London for a month and just see how that's like, and spent half of my savings. And then I had quit my job. And so at that point I was like, I don't have anything else. This has to work. And I'm not saying that to like, because I hate it when just me personally, when you glorify like the struggle too much. And then people feel like, okay, I have to quit everything and then do this. It's not really like a good place to create from when you're like unsure of where you're going to work. But in the end, I did get a second job. But anyways, like that's how I got the drive to do it. And I just really wanted to like complete something, just see something to the end, you know? And then it's like, and I also think it's important to have like a personal definition of like, why are you doing this? You know? And then I was just like, because I feel like this is something I needed when I was younger. And so maybe it'll be nice to be the one who can, you know, contribute to that vision. And so that's what's kept me going. But then it's very, very, it takes a lot to work in that mind frame. It really does, you know, because you have to pay your bills. You have to do all of these.
The practical things.
The adult things, you know.
Yeah, the grown-up things.
Yeah. So it was really nice when we got like funding in the end. Yeah.
It's interesting to hear because I'm looking around the table and across the table right now, and you're from Tanzania. Yeah. And you're from the UK. I'm from Nigeria, you know, and I probably have the same stories as you guys do have. You know, I think, I don't know, it's interesting to hear that even as foreigners, you know, you still like keep it going. I feel like you're in a place where it's an all or nothing kind of thing, right? But it really doesn't have to be, you know, but it's just that drive, I guess. And then you talk about how you saved money and then you went back to the UK. and then we speak to Eva, who's lived in the UK, you know. So tell us, why does Bergen appeal to you, or why did Bergen appeal to you more than the UK did? Because looking on the outside and listening to these stories, it just seems as if there's more going on in the UK than there is going on in Bergen. So tell us why.
Yeah, I mean, there is so much going on in London, and that's where I was for the last 13 years before I moved here. But it's very big, and somehow the amount of opportunities, exhibition spaces, programs that there's also more people in London than there are in Norway. And so the kind of idea when we graduated of like, if we move to London, there will be these opportunities for us, that doesn't really exist because there are more people. So in London, yeah, we really found ways to sort of create our own spaces to do things, because there was no way we were going to get given an exhibition anytime soon. So we had to make it for our own, and that's how we sort of built our community in London. So Bergen, yeah, working here on and off for the last 5 years, it's a lot smaller, and I feel like I have a community here, and I feel like it's easy, or it has been easy for me to, maybe because I'm just sort of arriving with this, lack of the noise around me, to meet people and, like you were saying, just like go up to people and introduce myself and start to make connections. And I really have enjoyed the smaller community here. And I felt like when I was working here a few years ago and I was curating the landmark program, then I arrived at a point when there was a lot of campaigning for 50-50 gender balance in music. And that was like all the festivals were like trying to champion the fact they had got, 50% women on stage. And that was the sort of context I came to here. Whereas, it felt like in the UK, there were conversations that had been happening maybe for a bit longer. And I guess the interesting thing here was that at that point, people were starting to sort of look between those 50-50 binaries of male-female equality and think about who actually is included in those. Like, are you included in that 50-50 balance if you are a woman in a wheelchair? Like, no, you cannot. You cannot be part of this festival happening at Landmark if you're in a wheelchair. Or like, how many of those people are people of colour, or where do you fit if you don't identify with a gender binary? And I felt like at that point, those discussions were just starting here in a really honest way. And that's what has brought me back. And I've been working for a long time thinking about how institutions can also be these places where you like support and champion and think about different ways of running an institution that can ask those questions and think about how are we organised, what is our programme looking at, who's involved, who's not. And so, it was like
So ironically speaking, the size of Bergen, it's its strength.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like I'm excited and I feel supported here by organisations and groups and projects, like definitely by the work that Sheila's doing and Vuma, who are here to kind of also keep pushing that. And it's for me it feels much more tangible here than it was in London because it's a smaller place. So I feel like it's exciting to be here, but I also feel like there's work to do here which I'm invested in.
Of course, that's why we're still here.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. So we talk about this. So you get an idea, you get to pursue that idea. We talk about perseverance. We talk about networking, which is absolutely important. Now, here comes another question. Where do you even find the space? And I'm pointing this at you, Sheila, because I feel like you've spent a lot of time on this, like how did you, okay, let's say, for example, I have an idea and I'm trying to find a space to do it. How do I even start?
Does your idea need a space? I think like you need to start where you are. I mean, the way you were saying, like when you were in London and you had the exhibition space in your apartment, so it's like, I think what can kill an idea is if you start too big. And I think part of like why it was so hard like to get started is because we had like really big ideas, like really we want to have this, we want to like, it should be like this magazine where we have Kanye or something. I don't know. Like I felt like we were not being realistic. And then when you have really big ideas and you get started, it's like very hard to keep
it going.
Keep it going, and even for others to like see or understand what you're doing. Yeah. And of course, it's much easier when people have seen what you've done, and then you can be like, this is what I'm doing. But then when you're beginning and you don't have like it's just an idea, it's just air. It's a sentence in your mind. It's very hard to get other people to understand.
It's hard to get them to see your vision.
To see your vision. And so when you're saying like, where do you get the space? There's a lot of places you can go so others can help you, sharpen your idea. And there's plenty of organizations in Bergen that work with that, and you don't have to pay anything. That's what helped us in the beginning. I went to an organization called Batteriet i Vest.
Batteriet i Vest?
Yeah, and so they are under Kirkens Bymission, and they help like nonprofits. They help, and they'll sit with you when you're doing like the paperwork and everything. Like they're amazing. And in the first year, like before I registered Vuma, Vuma had started in 2017, but then I was just like, we need a new name because we're going to do something different. And then the name I first registered was like, I called it Idea 1133.
I think I remember.
That's the worst name. And then they invited me for this conference, and then I had like the name on my shirt. And then everyone was like, the hell's that? What's that name? And then like someone was like, we were having a discussion and she's like, the Idea 11 what? And then I was like, okay, we need to change the name. But but then they didn't judge me. They're like, are you sure you want this name? Okay. They helped me. So like there's a community of people who have ideas. So you should seek like-minded people, because that will give you energy when you get started. Yeah.
And I think what you say about does your idea need a space is really important. And when we started doing the exhibitions in our living room, we had this idea that we had to create a gallery space, that it had to be white walls, open for a set amount of time. I mean, of course, like the first exhibition that we did, no one came, but we cleared out our apartment of everything and made this white cube space. And then over time, we realized just because we have this idea of an exhibition, we can actually create the space that we need for it. And it doesn't need to be in a gallery space. And maybe actually it makes more sense that it's in a space where people can have a drink and feel at home with us. And or does it can it exist somewhere that doesn't look like an art space, but actually that's where the best ideas form, when they are kind of just in a space that you need just to be able to share those ideas and talk to each other. And I feel like, there's often this stumbling block where you're like waiting to get to the space that you need to qualify your work as art or as professional enough. And actually there's a point where you sort of realize you can start to define what that space is for yourself.
That's interesting to say, actually, because I'm going to ask the two of you two different questions. I think this is important for those who are actually trying to, move somewhere with their ideas. First of all, we'll talk about idea 1133, which was your initial name for Vuma.
Worst name.
and then you met people to help you establish, and then they were somewhat indirectly criticizing the name of your company, so to speak, which means you have to compromise and say, okay, I'm going to change the name to something else, and of course there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, but that compromise is what I'm going to get at, because a lot of people I meet sometimes, they have these ideas, and then the first thing they probably think is, how am I going to fund this? Right?
Yeah.
So, how do you fund, or how do you guys get funded? And I'm asking the question on behalf of people watching from home, just in case, they're trying to follow a lead or a footstep or a path of sorts.
I mean, it's very hard with funding. I would say we really started working with Vuma fully, from the end of 2019 and then the whole of 2020. So when we first started getting funding, it was towards the end of 2019. And
so
we
after a year or
after a year or so after registering, which is the most important step when it comes to funding, because that's when they see okay, you're serious about your idea. But then we didn't get enough. So it was just enough to get started. Let's say cover the basics, but it's not enough to pay yourself. So it's not enough to it's not, you have to compromise a lot of things, but then money is what gets things done. And maybe to be able to do something for free, it's the best time is when you're a student. That's why most companies or most things get started when people are still studying in university. And so that was part of my plan. I was like, if we don't get funding, I'll do a master's, and then then I can work on my idea on the side. But then, that's the thing. And also when we got funding, it kind of bound us to do it, because then you couldn't be like, I give up, because you signed a contract, and if you give the money back, they won't trust you again. But so when it comes to getting started with funding, I think we were really lucky. The timing. I'm using the word lucky, but then the timing was good, because we had started this meetup group. So that's how you see, you don't have to go big. We just started a meetup group where we were going to events, and then we were selecting events where the person who was doing the event was a minority or person of color, and then we would have arranged that we can meet the artists. So we took a group with us, and then we went to the space, met the artists, and then had discussions afterwards. And so we were doing this with a group of people who hadn't explored much of Bergen's cultural scene, because there's so much happening. Yep. And so if you're, let's say, part of a certain community, maybe you don't feel like going to Grieghallen or going to Bergenskjøtt is necessarily a place where you feel like I can just show up and, hang out, And so that was a way for us to start a conversation of what can we do at Vuma? how can we engage with people? So we were like, okay, if we start a meeting place, then we can start figuring out like what need do we want to serve.
Right.
And so we would reach out to like people at Grieghall, and then we reached out at people from Bit Teatergarasjen, and they were having a show, and they're like, oh my God, that's good, just come.
Who said come? Was it Greg Holland or was it Bit
But
Theater?
Grieghall and
Nice.
Bit Teater. And and it's Bit 20 at Grieghall, who it's a specific experimental music group. And so they were like, yeah, just come. And then we started like a collaboration there. And so when you're applying for money and you write that we've had a collaboration with Bit 20, we've had a collaboration with Bit Teatergarasjen or Bergen Assembly, then it kind of validates like, okay, you're going out, you're seeking other people, and these people trust you. Okay, so maybe we can trust you too with this amount. So you see, so like the first year Bergen Kommune just gave us 20,000, and all we could do with that was like buy a domain and
for the website,
coffee for the meetups and stuff. But it still helps.
Of course.
And then and then when they see like what you've done with this small amount, then it increases. So it's just like start small, and there is a really big value in starting small. But once you go with like all the big ideas, you kind of get discouraged when it doesn't happen.
What do you say to that, Eva?
Yeah, I think it's like a really good way to think about what do you have and what can you do with it, and a bit like trying to think about the space that you need for this project, and then it just get halted because that space doesn't really exist unless you have a lot of money or a lot of contacts. And it's the same with funding. Like if you have this 20,000, like what can you do with it? And yeah, buying coffee means you can like keep those meetings going. And if that's all you can do until the next funding application, it's just keeps you going. And it's finding ways, I think, to think about funding as enabling rather than like we didn't get it so we just can't do it. It's like you can, but like what can you use with it? And if you have that desire that this has to happen, then the funding will always support that. And after time, if you keep going and showing what you're achieving with that funding, yeah, like Sheila says, the funders will see it and other people will see it, and
exactly
like starting any project, it will start to grow. But I think, yeah, it's always, I find it helpful to sort of think from the other way. It's like we have this, we can do something, even if it's just create a web page or hire a desk space somewhere or buy a microphone, or like that's the only thing we do. But then this means we can now do something with it.
Reach out to more people, obviously.
exactly
Yeah.
You know, but then again, those are the pros when it comes to funding. But and which is a good thing, of course. Like you guys have talked about, it helps you start up your work. It takes you to the next level, and you want to move on. But then again, what are the cons? What are the cons when it comes to funding? I feel like it's always a binary movement when it comes to things. If it's good, but there's always a catch.
I mean, I can say like we got most of our funding during Corona, so most of the the funding bodies have been understanding, because it's a weird time. So if things don't go as you planned, then it's okay. But I mean, when you write in the you write what you want to do in the application, and then the people who are giving you money can say, okay, we only support this part of your application. Right? So then it's up to you to sort of figure out like, how should I shift my project for it to work for me? You know, and so most people, when they're applying for money, they take 6 months before they get started doing something, because then they can really like get their head around like what they can do and such. But I don't know, like in terms of limitations, maybe if you don't deliver what you were supposed to do, like I think that's my nightmare. If you don't, honestly, like if you don't deliver what you're supposed to do, and then they'll be like, we need all the money back. That's, I think,
Wow, okay.
that's the anxiety. So I feel like, that's maybe the biggest con. But generally, I mean, you're the one who do the application, so you write what you want to do. And so if they say they only support like this part of what you can do, then it's not necessarily limiting you. But then I've heard others say like, but then when you see other certain project getting money, then they'll maybe manipulate you to like change your vision so that you can get money. That does happen for sure.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
That is definitely a bad thing, because it limits like freedom of expression when it comes to different art projects. But then it's like, you know, you have to compromise in the beginning so you can get where you want to go. And then when they know like you're this person, then I feel like they can't say no to you, you know, they can't say no to what you're doing once you've built that trust. Yeah, exactly. So I don't know, it's very complicated. I mean, we're so new in the game, but I've definitely heard and been in discussions where people are like saying that, you know, it's this very limiting when it comes to like which projects get money.
Wow.
Yeah.
We're going to get back to that in a little bit, but I wanted to say something because we are in a pandemic.
Yeah.
We are in a pandemic, and a lot of people, I don't know, I think a lot of people have stopped what they were doing because of Corona, of course. And one of those people who actually, I'm surprised you're still, you know, keeping it going at Bad Against Shut, you know, because you took over Bad Against Shut 2 weeks before Corona kicked in. How are you still surviving? Like, how do you keep yourself by the day? Especially you being such a person who I know can move mountains and well, obviously that's a figure of speech, guys. You can no, someone who's very well versed in the game. Like, how do you keep your head above water at Bad Against Shut?
I mean, there is some like really practical reasons that have made it possible, and then there's also the like gut reasons that sort of bring in everything we've been saying so far about like, what can I do with this? We can do something. Like we don't have, so to start with the practical reasons, when Beg and Shut changed from an artist-led project as it had been set up and run for 10 years to a foundation in 2019, then that foundation bought the building. And so there's a misconception that Bergen Kommune own the building, and they don't, but they were involved in making sure that building could be saved. And so now we own the building, which is a huge privilege compared to a lot of other organisations who rent their building and now working out how to make their rent. But we also have a multi-million kroner mortgage. But we paused the mortgage payments. So I paused the mortgage payments for 6 months, which meant we had some cash flow to be able to really look at what we needed to do to make the building as good as possible. And a lot more people are using the studios now because they're not touring. So it's like, we need soap dispensers and we need the electrics to be safe. So we invest in that. And so, and also because of this change in management, Beg and Shut didn't have a substantial program which was bringing in income. So that's a target in the budget, but it wasn't compared to a lot of other organizations who had to cancel festivals, events, hires. Like, that is not an income stream that we lost due to Corona. So then those kind of practical things of owning the building, not having a huge loss of income, just not being able to make any more income, and having this building, then it's like, what can we do with this? And so one of the sort of, reasons for trying to keep going is that we are one of the biggest venues in Bergen now, and there's not much there. I mean, there's 80 chairs now and some tables, and there's no heating, but there's a space, and there's a space for people to do things and meet. And Corona.
But then how does that affect you psychologically? You know, knowing that you could potentially have 80 people in that room, you know, right now, if it weren't for a pandemic. As an artist, of course, first and foremost, and then and as a manager of the establishment. What does that do do you think about it sometimes? Does it,
like, what would happen if there was no pandemic?
What would happen if there was no Corona?
Yeah, I mean, a lot would have happened, but I would have gone into it like, okay, there's already events planning. How are we going to do this? And actually, I think the pandemic is sort of slowing down and taking stock of. And it was, in a way, really fortunate, privileged time that I could take the time to think about, like, what is this organization going to be? Like, when we open it up again for 600 people, I need to make sure that we have a toilet which is wheelchair accessible. And when we open up again for 600 people, what will happen here? And, you know, how will people know about Beg and Shut? What can we do? Who will use it? And in a way, the pandemic, it's affected people in very different ways, and it's meant that Beg and Shut has been a way for me to sort of make connections and host people there that maybe I would never have encountered, but at this moment they need a space and we can collaborate to make that happen. And this last 6 months, we've collaborated with Bergen Kunsthal to bring the landmark sound system to Bergenshut, kind of seeing like, I have a massive space but no sound system. Landmark can only now hold 25 people, but they have
a sound system,
crazy good sound system. So it's like, rather than us both not being able to do anything, what can we do if we come together, and how many other people can we support through sharing those resources? And it's a big kind of change in like brand identity and resources and staffing and management, but it's like we have to try and do something together. And a lot of good things have come out of that, and events have had to be cancelled because of the spikes and changed again. But we've definitely learned a lot through what we can do by using the resources in a different way.
I just admire your positivity.
Yeah.
No,
well,
it's
keeps me, yeah.
It's necessary to say such things, because I think a lot of people, which is allowed, didn't know what to do with themselves when Corona hit. And I totally get that. But just watching you speak the way you're speaking right now, it's very inspiring, And a lot of people can take this and say, wow, she's not even, of course she's faced by it a little bit, but then again, at least you're focusing on the positive side of things and things you can do while you're on a downtime.
Yeah. And I think like one of the things that has struck me most is that there has been, a lot of talk about like, how do we get back to things, or when will things go back to normal? And actually, I think this last 10 months has shown like there were already a lot of people that weren't able to easily go outside, to easily travel, to easily access the events and the programs that we were putting on. Like there were already a lot of people that were excluded from our institutions that were running in a normal way. And I feel like if one of the best things that comes out of this is that we actually stop to look at what happens when we go back to normal. Like I hope it won't be normal, because there are things that I feel like we all as people in these roles of organisers need to pay attention to what we were not doing beforehand, because there were so many people who could only ever access this kind of event online before. So now everyone's had to do it. Like, what have we learned? And how do we pay attention to the exclusions that we were making before? And that's what keeps me going, because I'm interested in, as an institution, how can we actually like think about that and make those changes, and do it with now a community of other institutions who are in a similar position. And I guess I recognize this position that we're in with our own building and limited budget, but like we have something, and it's just the way that I think about working of how to share it. And
that's dope. What about you, Sheila? How did it affect you, the pandemic?
I think...
Were you just as positive as Ava was?
Because I feel like I needed definitely slowing down. I really, really needed it, because we were, again, I was saying, like, when I was talking about you need to start small with your idea, it's from experience, because we were starting with too many ideas. And so it was like doing 3-4 ideas in one go. And it was just very tiring. And it also like affects the quality of the other things you're doing, because you're lacking focus. You're constantly just trying to put out fires between different things. And so when Corona happened, it was just like, oh, I can lay in bed for a week. And then that was the first thing.
It's been 10 months.
that was the first thing. And then after, obviously, I had to work. But and then it just made me think more about like the quality of what we're doing. Like, how can we push something like to its fullest point? Because like, and also we didn't get that much funding to do everything. And so when you're doing like 4 or 5 different things because you're trying to prove something since you're new, it definitely was like taxing for the whole team. And we're only 3 people, and all of us are very creative. And we don't have like a background in financing and organizing. So because it's the first time, now I have time to like pick up a book and learn about it, or go on an online course and work on it. And so that's like been the positive side. Obviously, the biggest effect is like we can't hold the meetings we've been having. Some of the people who would participate in the cultural meetups are people who had just moved to Norway, and that was like their only source of socialization. And so like I really feel bad that we're not able to provide that anymore. And so it's been positive in that way, in that we can now have some time to like just think through what we're doing and make sure that all of the things we're doing reach the target group. Like the whole 2020, we're working on an app called Vumasuna. And so on the app, it's like it launched with 5 different stories tied to places. So it's geo-triggered. You have to walk to a space and then you'll hear a story tied to that place. But then the thing is, like, because the festival, it was a project we did together with the Bergen Center for Electronic Arts. And it was meant to launch in May, and then it got postponed to November. And then we were supposed to record the stories, but then you couldn't be in person. And then some of the people who we were working on with the stories, they are paperless refugees. And so, like, if they get sick with corona, they don't have right to healthcare. And so we had to be mindful of all of these things. And when we finished, it was just like, oh, such a huge relief, because now it's done, it's out there. But then on the other hand, we couldn't really, it was really hard to think of how do we make sure it reaches people? How do we make sure that everyone uses it and knows that it's happening? So because we were so focused on one part of the project, then the outreach part suffered. So it's like there's this great app out there, but then it's like nobody knows about it. And so it's just like made us very aware of how do we spend our time when we're working on something, and how do we ensure that the quality of it is good and as good as we can get it. And so like that's been the benefit. I think that's a huge, like that's the lesson we've had because of Corona. Because if it wasn't for Corona, maybe we would just be hopping on to the next thing, and we wouldn't have realized that we missed the step when it comes to some of the things we did. And also like during 2020, I got my job like in filmmaking. So that was like a huge thing after, so many years of waiting and doing many different things to get to that point.
I'm glad you said that because I think the thing is, when we have these conversations, I think a lot of people are watching and thinking maybe you're going to give them like a step-by-step to success. You know what I mean? And I don't think that's really what it is.
Yeah.
I think because that's what I see sometimes is that people are not really paying attention to the details. And by the details, I mean,
Exactly.
you don't want to see the struggles. You know what I mean? People look at you at a certain position and think, oh man, that's Eva, she's running Bergen. Wow, how do I get that right away? Or that's Sheila doing Vuma, and that's the reason why I'm asking all these questions, But there's one more thing I got to ask though. Sometimes and correct me if I'm wrong on this, sometimes I feel like there's one thing creatives in Norway are lacking. I see this all the time, and that's collaboration. On a broader sense, of course. Of course, you have your friends and people and that's fine, But I don't see that many people who just come out of nowhere, and then reach out to someone else who's probably doing the same thing they're doing. And then say, hey, how do we collaborate and just do this? Because the other alternative would be funding, right? To get their own ideas out there. Because if you go to the States, I was living in the States last year, and it was a lot of it was a room filled with strangers who didn't know one another. And it was like, hey, do you do a presentation? And then you'd be like, hey, what's that? Let's collaborate. Let's do something. I made a song called Reasons to Hate when I met Vera in Vegas, and that was it. It was just one conversation, and she's a producer, and we made a song together, But why do you guys think that is? I mean, I might be wrong, but I've been in this game for a bit myself, and I see that sometimes that people are not that good at collaborating with others, or at least trusting each other's dopeness, because everyone thinks they bring something too tangible to the table to risk it all on someone else's trust, I guess.
Yeah.
Is this a thing, or am I the only one who's...
I mean, it hasn't been that way in my case. I feel like, but then again, it's like what my case is not the rule in a way. So I feel like we were very, I don't want to use the word lucky, but I would say it was just like a lot of coincidences, because like, for example, one of the people who we've been collaborating with, like, on the website, for example, when we had just gotten the 20,000 from Bergen Kommune 2 years ago now. And then I was at this like Innovation Norge event, which they have like every 3 months, which is like free. They just talk about like what you should do if you have like a startup, and then they talk about their page, and then you can tell them your idea, and then they'll tell you like if it's a good idea or not. So I showed up, and it was really full, and then everyone had to like introduce their idea. And then when I was at this event, then there was there were two Norwegian men, and then they're like saying like, yeah, they're working on a business that is related to media. And I sat there and I was like, I need to talk to them. and then when the event ended, and I said hi, and I was like, hi, I'm working on this platform, and then like I just wanna, it should be like, you know, representative and all these things. And then he was just like nodding, like, yeah, cool, that sounds really good. And then they gave me their cards. And then we got in touch, and so he runs a page called serienit.no, which writes like reviews about all kinds of series, and also he runs a company that provides like data services, you know, with like setting up your website and all of this. And he helped us like with the little amount we had, and he had courses with us on how to do it. And it's just like, you know, and he's very open, and we were like, right. We were just like, we hadn't done much at that point, and his company had come so far, and he was just like, I see what you're trying to do. Maybe that's also the other thing, like, but then before that point, I mean, we had the idea 113. Maybe he wouldn't have met me at that point. Right, you know? Right. He would be like, okay.
That was my point. That was my point exactly. And it lends credence to what we were talking about early on about consistency. You know, where you know when you do something over time, and people see that you're serious about what you're doing, and then say, oh, cool, she's done that, he's done that. And that's fine. But whatever happened, now correct me if I'm wrong, you know, maybe I'm living in a fantasy land of sorts, but I want to speak on behalf of certain people who all they have is just faith in other people. You know, Paul Walker said something. He said, you never know what people are capable of until you give them a chance to do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And as creatives, sometimes I look at these things from my perspective anyways, and I'm watching, and I see sometimes I do believe that people are just not strong-willed enough to believe in other people and just say, I don't know what you're doing, but just listening to what you're saying right now, that sounds fire. Let's do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Why is it just here? Because in Africa, you know, people just do stuff, you know, without funding or anything. They just like, you meet someone, you're like, hey, that sounds dope, let's do it. You know, but here, it might be present here, of course. I have collaborated with a lot of people, thank God. But is this something I'm saying from a different place, or is this something you guys have experienced yourself? Now go back to the beginning when you started, right?
Yeah, I think also tying back into the collaboration, my sort of experience is quite similar, that I've been looking for the collaboration, so I've found it, and made it. So I feel like I'm living in a very collaborative cultural scene and place where things do happen. But I mean, in the UK, because there is no funding for culture, or very little, or it is very, very skewed towards making you do something very specific, then you have to collaborate because you don't all have your own equipment or your own space or your own staffing. Whereas, I mean, here the funding, it is more plentiful. So lots of organizations like have the same equipment or have the same kind of ability to do program. And I feel like it's in the collaborations have been where you have something and you don't have something, and then we can do it together. But maybe here it feels like sometimes there isn't so much active collaboration, because actually we're in a very look at all this equipment. Why would you ever need to collaborate with anyone? We've got the building, we've got the cameras, we've got coffee. Whereas, I mean, I'm back in a situation at Bergenshut because of the change in management that, you know, I don't have anything. So I'm just actively, like you, just who can I? You've got this. Let's collaborate.
But isn't that a good thing, though? That's a good thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because it keeps you busy.
Yeah, definitely keeps me busy. But I think the same for me is the same. Like, I sort of trust people, and I want to see things that I'm not seeing anywhere else, because and I want to give a space for those projects which maybe don't have a space somewhere else. And that's not because they don't exist, it's because those people, or those minorities, they're a minority in the mainstream culture, like they have not got access to those spaces, whether it's through like who they know, or their education, or just a kind of expectation that they are not doing something as good, or that because they are coming from a minority background, they are doing like community work, which is not as good as this concert. And so I guess I'm sort of always looking for like what these things and people, they exist, and it's up to us that have the possibility with the program and the space to make space for those things and learn from them, like learn from how other people use the building that I could never imagine, and recognize that there are reasons that we don't see such a diverse culture.
I'm glad you said that, because I didn't want to go there when it came to diversity, but we listen to the conversation. You kind of you're forced to, especially when you live in Norway or in Bergen. The question of diversity has to be raised sometimes, because there's certain places in Bergen. There's so many talented people here I've seen from different cultural backgrounds than the Norwegian cultural background, and sometimes they feel like there's this what you call confirmation bias, where it's, hey, I'm a foreigner, I don't know if I can get that place or if I'm going to get that job, even though you're highly qualified to get that job, And of course, I got to ask you, Sheila, like, did you ever get that, mindset? Now I'm speaking on behalf of anyone who's watching and has that mindset. Does that ever hit you sometimes?
Yeah, I mean, it's been there. Like, you question things twice in a way. Like, oh, should I apply? But then you also have like, even as a woman, like I feel that's also something you do, like, like overworking for free or not valuing what you're doing and questioning, like, should I demand pay for what I'm doing, or should I do it for free, or stuff like that. But then you're mentioning like the barriers of getting into a certain job, or getting into a certain place. But it's definitely, there's some truth to it, because like, if I'm very insecure about how am I supposed to stand in a gallery, like, why would I go there, and that's also like part of the reason why it's like there's not that many like minority presence in such events, because it's like, there's a stiffness to a certain place, and the instructions are not given at the door. So then there's like a huge expectation placed on those who are new, when it comes to like, participating into things like, oh, it was free, like, why didn't they come? Like, that's not enough. And so that's definitely one thing. But then I do think, like, I came to Norway when I was 10. So it's like, I've kind of just been used to being like the outsider or the only one. In fact, when I'm at an event where there's like a lot of diversity, I'm like, what happened? Like, oh, we're not the only, and then you have this eye contact between you and the other black person, and you're like, wow, we're here. But then and that's also part of why we started the whole culturtreff, right, with meeting and going to events. It was to have these discussions, because once you feel comfortable going somewhere, then you're much more comfortable applying for the job. Then you become more comfortable talking to the staff, and if they see you like a few times, in the end, like, a conversation is going to.
So you need to spark something first, and then keep going at it, and then you.
Yeah, I mean, that's what helped me when it comes to like my when getting the work in like film, for example. It was just like, okay, I'm not finding my way into this industry right now. Let me just try different things, and then at some point, like, because people have seen me different places, and they're like, hey, you said you work in film, because that's usually like people hire who they know. That's sad. But that's facts. Like, it's people hire who they know. True. And so like, because they've seen me before, like once or twice, then they're more likely to like take more time reading my CV, for example. And so I feel like even though we're working with culture and arts, that's also the intent behind the meetings. That, you know, if we bring people to a certain place and then they start conversating with the staff there, then maybe there's like a way in that may lead to like maybe a job or, you know, networking.
And see, the thing is, I need to be also careful with how I'm presenting the question, you know, because I'm not saying, when I'm saying diversity, I also mean people who are not from Norway, you know, in general. You know, it's not a black and white thing or any of that. It's just
that's true.
that in general, because that can be so easily misunderstood, especially, you know, given my background per se. I'm just speaking on behalf of people who are not from here. Because sometimes here, it seems that you come to Norway and then you're told to learn the language. And then you learn the language. But then again, there's also something called a coded language in Norway, which if you're new here, you don't see. And I've been here for a while, but it took a while for me to see it. You know, there's a certain kind of way to speak. You never really know what to say. If what you're saying, if you're too loud, you know, or or you're being too aggressive, you know. And then I feel maybe sometimes, the reason I'm saying these things, because I know a lot of people who are watching, or some people who are watching this who are not from here, and it breaks my heart. Really, it breaks my heart sometimes to see these things in effect, you know. And that's why it's great to have the two of you here on, because you're from the UK, you're from Tanzania, you've lived in the UK, but you've, in a way, been through the trenches, you know. You understand how it works, and you've made your way to a certain kind of point. But do you feel maybe you can do more? Because there's something called janteloven in Norway. I'm sure you know what that janteloven.
Maybe for the viewers at home, you could just.
All right. Do I really need to? Okay. Oh shit. I'm like going to
explain
define janteloven. All right. Is this unwritten law about you know, knowing your own capabilities, or not saying you're too good at anything, or trying to show that you're too good at anything? You know, there's that unwritten law. Does that in a way stop you guys, or do you just ignore it and just do your thing?
I mean, like, I know when it comes to janteloven, it's like about, you know, that we're all equal and we all have equal rights. So it comes from
That's
like
the good side of it.
from that sentiment. But then I do feel like it definitely does. It can be a bit oppressive. Yes, it can be a bit oppressive in terms of like when you want to express yourself freely. It can limit that a little bit, because like there's this thing of not in the sense of showing off, but then just like standing out. Like, I think standing out in many Norwegian communities is kind of like a bad thing, especially when you're outside of like the big cities, I think. But then it's less and less now, I feel, because we have a lot of like impulse from abroad. We watch a lot of foreign TV, like, you know, with the whole Instagram and stuff, like it's normal to show off, but it's still you know, it's still like people comment like, oh my God, did you see they posted this? But then there is truly like a thing with standing out. Like that's a very big issue. And it's, how can I say this? For example, like now I can wear my hair like this, you know, but then 10 years ago, it would be like a thing.
Okay.
You enter a room and everyone is like, oh my gosh.
Oh wow.
You know? And it does kind of make people look at you a certain way, like you're different. And being different is not a good thing in the society here, because like if we're all meant to be the same and equal and you're like this, then you're kind of going against the grain. And so that may limit your accessibility to maybe a space or to a group or to a job.
Wow.
Yeah, definitely. But I think like the attitudes are changing and the conversations about it are happening now. Whilst before, like my mom came to Norway in the 80s and she was telling me back then, you know, like because the idea of how Africa was very limited to like, you know, all of the poverty ads. And so everyone was like, oh, stay away from me. I don't want to get, you know, sick or something. Yeah, but then with time, because of knowledge, because people are traveling, it's changing. But that's because, you know, it's very hard to like play down, you know, like the color of your skin or or you know how your hair really grows and stuff like that. So it has something to do with like it can be seen as threatening if you're too different. Yeah. But nowadays it's like it's being more embraced because we have like impulses from many different places.
So we're all the same still.
It depends.
But I think also a lot of the work that like you are doing with Vuma, like other groups, like for example, the Transgender Awareness Week that happened at the end of last year, like are really kind of pushing and questioning this idea of equality, that actually we are not all the same. And it's very nice to think about equality, but it's actually not that helpful. And it's much more helpful to think about how we want to get to this, but actually everyone is coming from like different places. Not if you give everyone the same, we're not all going to get to the same level. And so I think, yeah, a lot of the work that I'm really excited about in Bergen comes from groups like Vuma, Papillon, Saga, Transgender Awareness Week, who are really like, yeah, saying actually, no, like we are here and we are not equal and we do not fit into this idea of equality. And this is, this is what you need to
And also
realize.
I want to like touch up on the when it comes to like being equal, it does come from like, in order for me to pay my taxes, I need to believe like, you know, that we're all equal. You get my point? Like, okay, we all have equal rights. So it comes from that because like Norway used to be a very poor country before the oil. And so once the oil came, they made the decision that we're going to make sure that the wealth is spread amongst everyone. And so the whole growth of, you know, these national ideals came about. And they really take root. I mean, you see in the US when they talk about socialism and they're like, oh my God, that's so oppressive. That's so, you know, communist and all of this negative rhetoric about that. But then we do see the benefits of it in terms of we have access to healthcare, we have access to education and loans, student loans. And so like it started from a good place, but then on the other hand, it kind of impeded difference because there's nothing wrong with being different from someone else. You know, like I remember someone commented, I was talking to this woman from the Netherlands and we were talking about like a project. She was saying, yeah, I find I come alive in international settings because since I moved to Norway, I've been wearing a lot of black and a lot of gray, and you know, and that's also a thing. So you notice even in the way we dress, you know, like, but it could be because of the weather, I don't know. But then, like standing out, and that's why I felt like it was so important for me to live other places to get like impulses and to compare, you know, because I feel like in London, people are so free in their expression, while here it's like there's a lot of that we need to think the same if I'm in this group or that group, yeah.
And that's the reason why, that's the reason why I asked about the networking early on, you know, because networking is so important. You know, a lot of people say that you need to go out, you need to meet people, you need to do this, but sometimes you find yourself in a room and you can't even make a sentence. And maybe you're a very well-spoken person, but then again, you look around you and you can just feel like the people in that room just don't get it, you know, and then you're forced to speak a certain kind of language, you know, that kind of fits into what they want you to say. You know, I used to have that problem back in the day, I remember. But you just got to a point where I was like, you know what? Nah, I'm gonna speak my language. And it's on you to either you get it or you don't get it, pretty much. And quite frankly, it's probably the best thing I ever did in my life because I believe in self-expression. People should be who they want, you know? And we touched on a couple of other things. And, you know, because I feel like this whole being a creative here in Norway, in a way, it's kind of intertwined. There's so many, like you seek funding and then it's great, but you got to change something, you know, somehow, in some way, you know? And then it's, you're at the networking, but you got to speak in a certain kind of way. You know, it just makes you question if anyone is really, truly, freely a creative, you know? Because everyone creates this thing where, oh, look at me, I'm doing this, my life is great. That's because you have social media today, which the whole world looks as if they're doing great, but really, we all know it's like this, you know? So I had to ask all these questions, and I'm glad you guys answered them because I knew for a fact that you guys have been through the trenches and you know exactly how that shit works. You know, so thank you for coming out. Before I let you go, is there anyone in the audience who has any questions? You have the answers you need? Yeah, by the way, we have people in the audience, actually. We defied the law of not going to say it. Well, I just wanted to say thank you. Before I let you go, though, what's your plans for the comeback? You know, there's always that comeback
plan.
after Corona. What's the...
Yeah, well, at the moment I'm doing a lot of tidying up. And I'm trying to like actually make the spaces that we have like as safe and as good and as accessible as possible. And then, yeah, I'm really thinking about like, what is this after Corona time and what is the program and what do I want to hold on to that I've learned and met and worked with these months, which is, yeah, like you were saying, like encourage us to take a pause, to think about what we wouldn't had, where our blind spots were, what we could be doing better. So that's the moment that I'm in. I'm like planning for what do I want this cultural scene that I'm part of to be like. And then when that seems too big, I do some tidying up.
How do you find your Instagram? I believe you post a couple of pictures about your your day to day.
Follow my organizational journey. Yeah.
What's it called?
Oh, it's just at Eva Rowson or at Bergenschut. But yeah, there's a lot of sorting out at the moment. But I guess that sort of goes back to these things of like I have to sort of get the ground ready and prepare for what will happen when we can start to do bigger events, so that there is space for not always being the same people able to come or not feel comfortable coming to things, and that it's really, really super important to have good organization for your cleaning products, safe place to store wood, somewhere that staff can put their bags.
That's the most underrated advice, you know what I mean? Like, it's so
like,
underrated,
look after your like core, because how your cleaning cupboard is organized means that it affects how efficiently you can clean your building, then that affects how much money you have, then that affects who can come to things.
Hey, I'm taking notes.
Yeah.
You should do a seminar on these things. What about you, Sheila? Or are you just keeping it going the way it is?
No. We need to change things. We need to change things. No, I feel like our plans for the year is like the most important thing is now like with the app, adding more stories. Like we want to, since the stories are like tied to places, so we want to expand to different cities and just plan that, we want to add more stories to that. And then as well, like get the writer's room going and make sure that our contributors get paid. And so it's navigating that part and looking for collaborators. So I'm actually like, I am having in mind like what we've said in the conversation. So I'm excited to see, how I'm going to be able to find collaborators now that I can't go to events or just show up at certain places and all of this. But then I feel like the time pressure is off. So those are the things we're focusing on now. It's just like quality and consistency and capitalizing on what we've already done, not starting anything new. Yeah.
That's a very smart advice. A lot of people tend to forget that, like just work on what you're working on right now, make it look good, make it look better, and then, hopefully work on something else when what you had before is already set in stone and good to go. Yo, thank you very much.
Thank you so much
for coming
Thank
out.
you.
Thank you to everybody in the room. Thank you for those watching at home. Next week, Friday, we're back with another conversation with a guy called Helge Reyes from Philippines, actually. And for those who don't know who Helge is, he is the CEO and owner of Pharma Bargain, which is by far, in my opinion, the coolest sneaker store in the city. And he's going to be here next week to talk about how to become your own boss.
Yes.
I'm excited for that conversation for sure. And if you're a sneakerhead, you probably want to tune into that one. But if you're into starting your own company and owning your own company and being the boss of your own company, then definitely check it out. Check us out next week at the same time. I go by the name of Dorian's Grave on behalf of myself, Sheila, Eva, people in the room, Mikkel and Leah, Literature House, Oliver Chauger. Thank you very much for staying tuned and have a nice weekend. Good night.